Hi everyone, I'm Tom and welcome to my top 10 games for 2016. Now this is a bit of a preliminary list because there are some games that I haven't played yet from 2016 and some that I haven't been able to get hold of yet. There's some big things like Terraforming Mars, Great Western Trail, Manhattan Project Energy Empire, Vinhos Deluxe Edition. There's some really exciting things that I just haven't been able to get around to yet. So I'm going to do another list later on once I feel like I've played all the games I was really excited about from 2016. And there are a couple as well where I wasn't quite sure how to classify them. Things that have been on a lot of people's lists for 2015 that only came out in the UK in 2016. So I thought, well, I'll classify them as 2016. But then now I'm going to Essen and things, I've got some games that aren't released yet. So I spent more time than it was worth considering that. And I thought if I put them in a separate category at the beginning, I can mention two more games in the top 10. So some honourable mentions that are from 2015. First of all is Fuse, and this is absolutely my most played game of the year. It helps that it only takes 10 minutes to play and that it's ridiculously addictive, but this is a dice game where we are playing. We've got these cards that represent bombs and we are rolling dice and trying to assign them to our particular bombs, all within 10 minutes, and trying to get through this deck of bombs. And if players can't take all of the dice they're supposed to, you have to roll them and maybe put more dice back. It's fantastic. It's ridiculously addictive, as I said. It takes 10 minutes to play, plays up to from 1 to 5, so it's a nice solo puzzle as well. It's quite hard with 2 because you have to roll 4 dice and take 2 each every round, whereas in, say, a 5-player game, you roll 5 dice and everybody takes 1, so there's less of a chance from you not being able to take just 1 dice, although it can very easily happen if you don't pay attention to which cards you're taking. It's an amazing, amazing game, and technically it's a 2015 game, although it came out in January. So it's had the whole year to kind of sit with us, and we haven't played it for a couple of months. We definitely burnt ourselves out on it because we just played it incessantly. And then when we did play it as, okay, we've got 10 minutes spare to play something. Okay, let's just get Fuse out and we'll try and tackle, insane mode where you have to get rid of all of the cards from the table. And then that one play turns into 4 or 5 plays, and you could have played a full game in the time we've been playing Fuse, but it's been really, really fun. Love, love, love this game. And I'm sure once we've had a bit more of a break from it, we'll be back trying to crack the crazy difficulties again. So that is Fuse, designed by Kane Klenko. And the other game I just want to mention before the top 10 is something else that would have been on most people's 2015 lists. And that is the first in some huge boxes, The Gallerist by Vital Lacerda. And yeah, this came out in shops in around, I think it was April, May. So it was ready at Essen and everything last year, but it didn't manage to get to the UK for quite a while. Just absolutely love this game. I've got a solo playthrough for Fuse as well, actually, and The Gallerist. It's as in all of his games, it's an amazing, thinky, puzzle of a heavy Euro game, but every action kind of interlinks with every aspect of the game. So when you just take one action, you're actually affecting a million different things. I loved it in Kanban, I love Vinhos and CO2, and The Gallerist just keeps bringing that in where you're trying to discover artists, you're trying to get art for your gallery basically and make yourself the most prestigious gallery. But at the same time, you need to be promoting your artists. You need to find people who want to buy the art that you're selling. You need to put people in the international market so you can get end game things. It's a really, really fantastic heavy game. I love it to bits. And on top of that, it's got an amazing solo mode that is, like a lot of great solo modes, really simple. All you've got is a dummy gallerist pawn that is going to move 1 space clockwise every turn after you. And if it's going to leave behind an assistant every time, if you kick it out, then you have to get rid of these tickets, which are the timer for the game, so you're making the game run out. But you can also plan quite carefully which actions you're going to get, which kicked out actions you're going to get, because you know that he's going to move forward 1 space clockwise, so you can purposely leave things so you'll get extra actions. It's a really nice solo mode. On top of that, it's not just get a certain score, it's satisfy certain criteria, like have these objectives, have these kind of art in your gallery at the end of the game. Amazing, amazing game, The Gallerist. Okay, on to the top 10 for real now, and continuing the theme of, which might be a running trend in 2016, of huge boxes. Number 10 is Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition. Now this is the revamped version of, the first game was one player played the mansion and everybody else played the heroes trying to battle the puzzles and the monsters and everything that the mansion player would be thinking up, the keeper, I think he's called. And this basically takes all of the stuff that the Keeper did and puts it in a companion app that, you know, has some similarities to the Descent app that they brought out, which made that a co-op experience. So the gameplay of this is not something that I'm usually that much of a fan of. Fighting enemies, constantly rolling dice, hoping for decent results, and usually not getting it. But I love the storytelling and the exploration in Mansions of Madness. It's all handled by the app, and it's variable to an extent. You know, you're playing through, I think the app comes with 4 scenarios, and then certain expansions they've released have added more. But they are replayable to a point where some of the setups are going to be different each time. But generally, you know, you're playing through trying to figure out the story, and once you've figured out the story, that part is not going to be new anymore. There's going to be different enemies and items and things, but generally it's going to be similar. We have gotten to, I don't know how many times we've played it now, 4 or 5 times, and we are still on the second scenario. We know everything about that scenario now. We just need to be able to win it. That's the only thing we don't know, is how to actually work out and get there in time. But once we've done that, there's even longer scenarios and even harder scenarios to get through. And hopefully they've sorted out the save game thing. I remember when I did the review, they were warning people not to play the huge games and save their game because the app wasn't working. Hopefully that's working now. But yeah, the actual going around and trying to explore these new areas that might not be laid out the same as you remember, and trying to work out this mystery. I love that it just it sets the scene and then just puts you in the world and basically just says play. You'll work out your objective as the game goes on. You'll be given clues in the story and things, but you're trying to progress through, just trying to work out the best course of action to follow on from the story that you've been given at the start. I really like that. It's not just you start the game, find this thing, go to this place. It kind of lets you work out what's going on as you go. And yeah, a really nice experience, and I'm looking forward to playing through the rest of the scenarios. That's Mansions of Madness number 10. Now for number 9, we're going back to much earlier in the year. This is Quadropolis, and this is a kind of puzzly city building game where we have these grids of cities and we are trying to take tiles from a central display. But the way you take the tiles is really interesting. Everybody's got an engineer with a certain number on it, and you put the engineers at the end of a row or column on this central grid. And say you put the number 2 in a column, you can take the one that's 2 away from where you put the engineer. So it makes that a really nice puzzle of how you get the tile. Then it's got the thing that's seen in a ton of games like it, like Between Two Cities springs to mind to start with, where all of the tiles have certain scoring criteria. You know, the parks want to be next to the residential, the shops want to be next to this, the harbours want to be in a straight line. It's got that really nice scoring system that's seen in a lot of games. And yeah, the puzzle of how to fit these things in your city, as well as how do you get these tiles, is really fantastic, especially towards the end of the game. Once you are running out of options and space in your city, you're going to find it's possible to find it really hard to get these things placed, and you might have to just forego getting a tile altogether. It's got a basic version of the game where everybody's got their individual engineers, and there are 4 rounds in the game. And then you can play the advanced version where we have a collective pool of engineers to take from. So you might not necessarily get engineers 1 to 5 because depending on the number of players, there's that many of the engineer in the middle. And there's also 5 rounds and all sorts of different ways of playing through this. And not only are there the basic and advanced versions, they're both equally, in their own way, really good. A lot of games, I would just skip straight to the advanced version. In this, it's really different. It can be just a really fast-paced, simpler affair, but it can have some meat behind it as well, depending on what you're in the mood for, depending on what you have the time for or who you're playing with. It's fast, it's simple to teach, it's got gorgeous art and components and everything as usual from Days of Wonder games, and it's just a fantastic city-building game. That's Quadropolis number 9. Number 8 is Fields of Green from Artipia, and anyone who's familiar with the game Among the Stars will recognise some of the things in Fields of Green. You build a farm from these square cards, and it's a card drafting game where it's also a little logistical puzzle of where to place the cards so they can be most effective. And as well as the Among the Stars style card drafting, or you can discard the card for money, you know, the Seven Wonders thing as well, it's also got a few nice changes that really mix it up, rather than Among the Stars always being about endgame scoring and things like that. There are cards with harvest effects in this, and the harvest happens at the end of every round, and all of your cards with harvest abilities need to be satisfied, or you flip them over and you lose the points for them and the abilities, unless you're going to give up actions later to flip them back. You get the crops that are going to generate you food, and then you get the animals that are going to use the food and get you money or points and things. And you can come up with these really nice, interesting systems. It also comes with buildings that you can build, so you can give cards certain special effects. It simplifies. A problem with Among the Stars is the setup time. Among the Stars is a big positive of it is it's been out for so long, it's so expanded, it's got so many cards for it that it's going to be so different every time. A downside of that is you have to go through this selection process of, well, we've got this number of players, so we need this many of each of these basic cards. Then we need to shuffle up this huge stack of special cards and get a certain number of those out. And you know, I've put all these objectives out for have this many blue cards, do this many blue things, and no blue cards came out. So, you know, I'm stuck this game just because that happened. In this, the cards are all in these different stacks for the types that they are. And at the beginning of each round, you get to pick how many you want from each of those stacks. There's a limit. You have to have at least 3 different types of card in your hand. But you get to pick what you need. So if you found that you're really short on, you know, food generation, then you can just make it so that your hand to start with is going to have a lot of animals, a lot of crops in it, so that you're going to have some more options in this round. You're never going to be just stuck by luck of the draw completely. Also, any expansions, and it came with a little promo pack at Essen, just get shuffled into the coloured decks. That's a really nice thing. Now, comparing it to Among the Stars, I think I still prefer Among the Stars. I really like the theme of Among the Stars more. I love the ambassadors, the fact that there are so many different cards in it still. So I think there's still definitely room for both. They play differently enough for me that I still want both at the moment. But yeah, Fields of Green was a fantastic variation on the Among the Stars starting point. I really like the way that the harvest abilities change it from just trying to have the most points and looking towards the end of the game. You also need to be aware of what's happening now because of the harvests that are going to happen every round. So that is Fields of Green, number 8. Number 7 is The Networks, going all the way back to the UK Games Expo when I picked this up, and quite early in the channel actually when I did a playthrough for this. This is a game where we are, taking cards from a central display to build up TV channels. We all have these starting channels of, I can't remember exactly the names, but basically watching paint dry and things like that, the program. These shows that nobody wants to watch, and we are trying to grab the amazing shows from the middle display, but this show needs a star, so I'm going to have to get the perfect star for it. Oh no, this star doesn't want to work on a sci-fi show. He'd have to get flipped and have no points. And then the show costs a lot of money, so we're going to have some adverts. I've run out, so we're going to have these ads. But these ads want to be on at 9 o'clock, and the show I want to put on is at 8 o'clock. It adds these really nice decisions of how to construct your schedule really nicely, but at the same time it's got this amazing tension because you can only do one thing at a time. You can only take one piece of your plan every time, and then depending on the number of players, it's got to go all the way around, and you've got to hope that the next piece of your puzzle is still available, because even if the people don't realize you need it, then it might just be a good card for what they want to do. So you have never really got enough time to form this perfect plan. You need to try and think of what you need the most first and what is going to be the most desirable to everybody else. Not only is that a big factor when you play with 3 or 4 players, if you play with 2 players or solo as well, it's got a really nice effect of a certain number of turns, you're going to have to burn cards in the 1 and 2 player games. And you draw from a deck that you draw from normally, and it's got some symbols at the bottom that don't mean anything usually, but when you're burning cards, it tells you to, okay, get rid of a star, an ad, and one of the passing spaces, so that now passing earns you less money because we were waiting, we were taking too much time up. And that really simple system really effectively simulates a game with fewer players. It simulates as if you were playing with more players and they were taking cards. So you can factor in, they're always going to be taken from the left, so you can, if you need something all the way on the right, you know you're safe for a little while. But I really, really like that part of it. And overall, just the theme more than anything. It's a really, really fun game, but the theme really, really appealed to me before anything else. You know, a game where I'm running a TV station is just fantastic, and I'd love to see more of that. The networks in particular, I know that Gil Hover, the designer, is teasing details of an expansion where you would have different powers for the different TV stations. I think one had a rondelle, one started off with a ton of extra money but had some restrictions on it. So really looking forward to anything more coming out for the networks, because this is just a lovely game and I want to play it all the time. Number 6, and returning to Huge Box Zone, it is The Colonists, the epic strategy game. And I did a 3/4 of a full playthrough of this, because this is a game that, it says on the box 30 minutes to 4 hours. This is really an epic strategy game. If you have got the time and patience for it, this is a whole day affair. It's a really amazing game where we have this hex grid of the city and these different places we can send our colonists to, this one gets wood, this converts the wood into this thing. This lets us take the planks we just converted to build this certain building, which will have this effect every round, and it will generate us wood or it will generate us tools and things. And it starts off as quite a deceptively simple game where we're just trying to get across this tiny maze that we've built and get the things that we want to build. But as the game goes on, at the end of every year, you start putting more tiles onto this thing, and the map just starts growing and growing and growing. At the end of each era, if you're going to play multiple eras, completely new buildings become available for you to build. And by the end of Era 4, the map is huge. There are so many options available for you, but this puzzle has been built up over time. So, these buildings are all going to have to go around the outside of this puzzle that you've built, and you're going to have to work out how you are going to get across it. It's the things that are keeping it from, being a bit higher for me are the playtime. It's never going to get played in one go. If we play a 4-era game, it's going to have to be split up and saved, because it's too much in one go for us personally anyway. And it can get a bit, especially for me, Rachel isn't very AP prone at all. She's quite a quick player, but it can get me a little bogged down where you have all of these options and, you want to do everything, and obviously you can't. You've only got a certain number of turns. You're always restricted on these things, but there are so many beautiful possibilities from the way that this Hex city can, connect you to all of these different things, but you've got to work out a path of getting to all of them as well. Also, if somebody's standing in your way, you're going to have to pay them an extra fee to get onto the tile that they're on. Just a brilliant, brilliant game. It comes with these embassies as well that are one of my favourite parts, that will, if you build these embassies, there are 4 different ones in every game. One gets added in the 3rd era, a 5th one, but you're going to play with 4 of these different ones every game, and they will break the game in brilliant ways of, usually a rule in the game is if you go to a space, you need to do the action there. You can't just go over it to get to something else. You're going to have to do the action there. One of the colonies is, well, ignore that and you can take a wood or a clay instead. And that's amazing. You might be nowhere near those generation spaces. And one is, every time you go to a market, instead of doing the normal market things, you can exchange things. You just turn all of your wood into food if you want to. They change the game in really big ways. And in turn, they make the replayability of the game, because while the map is going to be a different layout every time, and that's going to change the game up quite a bit as well, I really think the different combinations between the embassies that give you all of these crazy powers, some work together so perfectly, and if you can find those combinations and really leverage those embassies, it will make the games so different every time. It definitely needs a huge amount of time and table space and stuff, but still, it's a fantastic heavy game, and that's The Colonists. Number 5, continuing with huge boxes, is Millennium Blades from Level 99 Games. This is a game that really, sometimes, when Rado does a run through of something on Kickstarter, sometimes I'll have no money and I'll avoid that video just so I don't get tempted to back something I can't really afford right now. And I think in this case it was a combination of that, and it didn't really seem like something I'd be interested in. When it came time for this to be actually coming out earlier this year, I suddenly went back and watched these things that I'd skipped and realised that this sounds amazing. It's basically trying to simulate players playing a Magic the Gathering style collectible card game, where you will spend certain portions of the game trying to assemble a deck by buying packs of cards. Basically, you're just buying from a display and you see the back of the card. You know what type, what series it comes from, but then you open the pack thematically and flip over the card and see what the rarest card is in that pack. And for something so simple, it really simulates that really well. I mean, I can never claim to be that crazy into Magic the Gathering. I did play it for a couple of years, but not, I didn't go in tournaments or anything, but I did spend a lot of time building decks and buying these booster packs and things. And it does somehow really evoke that feeling of desperately trying to, well, I just need this one thing. If I buy another pack, oh no, there's another pack there, if I can get to it first. And on top of all of that great feeling of what it's trying to simulate, it's timed as well. So the parts where we're trying to build these decks are in real time. There are these stacks of money that are really nice. It's not just individual paper notes. You get these huge stacks of cash, and they are just being thrown around the table while everybody tries to frantically build the perfect decks they need, because you're going to be taking some cards into a tournament, and then we're going to play the cards in a kind of mini game inside the game. We're going to be playing these cards for effects, so trying to get the most tournament points, which are going to translate into real points afterwards. Also, you're trying to build collections as well, certain sets of the same type that have to be different costs. There are a lot of things to be thinking about in these short phases. I think they're about 20 minutes or so in total. You have some 7-minute timed rounds in between these tournament phases, and then you're playing all these cards to try and combo with each other. So this one will give you 5 tournament points at the end for every card of this type you've played, and then flip all of the cards of this type and get this many points for it. There's so many cards in this game. You can imagine from the size of the box, there is a ridiculous amount of content in this game, and the store deck that you build is huge. There's so much variety, and the gameplay is it's always been really, really fun, and never really felt like it hung around anywhere. It's always been propelled really well. It's a long game. I think it's taken us over 2 hours every time we've tried to play it. But yeah, there's been no playthrough for this, because I think it came out before the channel started. But also, it's, how am I going to simulate a real-time, 2-player card grabbing game? I can barely do it for myself when I'm playing the game. It can get so hectic at times. But the expansion for this, which is Set Rotation, which is due some point early next year, is going to add these mega bosses to fight against that turn Millennium Blades into a co-op game as well, which also means a solo game. So I will definitely be doing a playthrough for it when the expansion comes out. But still, without that expansion as a competitive game, it's fantastic. It's an amazing experience. Even for, as I said, I wasn't that into Magic, and it was years ago. It definitely brought back those memories and really got me into trying to build these, decks of cards. It's a fantastic, fantastic game, and I can't wait for these other modes later on. That is Millennium Blades. Number 4 is Railroad Revolution from What's Your Game? This is also from the designers of Zangwo, Marco Canetta, Stefania Niccolini, a game which I loved. It's not quite as heavy as that, but it's still a really amazing, thinky, puzzly game that plays in under an hour. It's a game where we are trying to, race across the USA during the big railroad boom. We're trying to build stations, rails, telegraph offices, and satisfy deals and things. And the main push of the game is that you have these 4 actions that you can take every turn, but you have these specialized workers in 4 different colors, and depending on which worker you use on which action, you'll get a crazy benefit. Like the main interaction in the game is trying to get to places first so you can get more bonuses. Well, if you're not first, you can use a grey negotiator on one of the build actions to get the first play bonus even though you're not the first. You can use an orange one to get a free station where usually you'd have to pay a lot of money. It ends up creating that you get these brilliant pools of specialized workers where if you use them in the right order, you can get these amazing combos coming off. You know, you can trigger these deals where you can spend shares to do extra actions by building rails or building telegraph offices. And using the right workers at the right time can be the key to pulling off these brilliant combos. But at the same time as you're making this really nice pool of workers, you have these milestones where you need to be satisfying certain criteria, build stations in certain places, build rail on certain difficulty spaces. At the same time as satisfying that criteria, you need to promote, you need to give up workers from that amazing pool that you have made and basically destroy the pool that you're building at the same time. It has to be done because they're worth so many points, but then you have to scramble and try and work out, well, I needed those workers for this and this. How can I change the way I'm playing? How can I get those workers back? How can I get the workers I need for this new milestone that I've got? It's a really fast-paced, but it doesn't lose any, of its... it's not a really AP-prone game, but it throws so many options at you. It's not a ridiculously wide-open game, but you just have all of these things spinning through your mind of, well, if I do this, then this, then this, then I can get these combos going off. But then if I do this instead, or use this coloured worker for this other action, then I can finish this milestone, and then I can trigger a deal and do all of this. There's so many brilliant things that happen in this game. I just love it, and just the first couple of times we played it, I've just been grinning the whole time. Railroad Revolution. I'm not sure if you can see the huge box that's hiding. Number 3 is Mechs versus Minions from Riot Games, which I have to kind of cower behind here. This is a cooperative game of programming where we play Yordles, which is a race of tiny creatures from the League of Legends universe, and they have these mech suits, and they are basically at school for training in these mech suits. So at the same time as you're learning the game, your characters are learning how to use these mech suits. And you use them by having this programming line, and playing cards into this line will make your mech do certain things like move or shoot or flamethrower and, or rotate 90 degrees. And your actions get done in a particular order every round. Once it's in the programming section, it's locked in. So your mech starts out really, really slow, just, might move forward 1 and shoot in the space in front of them. But later on in the game, as you play more cards to it and enhance these actions, you'll find that you'll be racing up and down these maps, taking out a ton of minions, and usually the thrust of each mission is that a load of minions are doing something, you need to stop them, you need to stop them getting to the school, you need to destroy this many, you need to go and get these artifacts. Whatever the mission is, usually there's minions in the way trying to stop you. And towards the end of the game, you can just be doing these crazy combos, spinning and moving all around the board and taking out everything. Whereas at the start, you were just struggling to, you're probably just, turning around and walking into a corner because you just haven't gotten the right cards. The way damage is handled in this game is fantastic. You draw from this damage deck, and some are standard things like you'll have to take a little penalty, but some go into your programming line and aren't always bad. Some will be like, move left, and that might just be perfect for you. You might just need to do that. Other times, you've got a perfect program already, and now in position 3, as your really amazing combo goes off, suddenly you're stepping 1 space to the left, and everything you're doing is missing now. And there are ways you can repair that damage, but it's a really nice way of handling it. Now, certainly part of my love for this game will be down to the fact that I've played League of Legends for quite a while. Used to play it a lot more than I do now, but love League of Legends, and just seeing the characters from that world represented perfectly as well. There's been a ton of raving reviews about this game where they go on about the component quality, the amount of stuff you get in this box, and that is all, I'd echo all of that stuff. There is a crazy amount of stuff in here. It's all produced perfectly to such a ridiculously lavish extent that you would expect this to be some crazy expensive deluxe edition. And it's actually quite reasonably priced. I think it's 75 euros it ended up being. But yeah, seeing these characters represented in the game, and not just that, there's really nice touches, like you open the box and you've got a letter from Rumble, who's a character in the game that started this school for mechs, and he's got kind of a list on the back of the characters that are in the game, and some questions that League of Legends players might have of why is X character not in here. Well, it's really nicely explained, and you know why Timo wasn't in the game had this explanation that related to something he was doing in the game at the time. You know, it's really, really, really nice. But the game itself, the actual board game, I really, really think is brilliantly fun. You are trying to assemble these programs, but you get the cards from a timed draft phase. So there's no time for all of this discussion about, well, this would be nice for me, well, I'd prefer it in this. No, it's timed. Take the cards and, you know, get them sorted, because if you don't, everyone's going to get a random card. Well, everyone that hadn't picked in time. So that adds a really nice element to it, as well as the changing missions. It's a game like, you know, what have I mentioned? It's a game where it starts out very simple. Harry Potter was one recently where I think I said that was like Mechs vs Minions, where it starts out quite a simple game, you know, with not that many rules. And over time, you're going to open these envelopes in Mechs vs Minions that give you your next mission, as well as, you know, expanding the rules and playing with the format of the games. You know, things that you were doing in the first mission, it might suddenly change the conditions that you were expecting, and you're going to have to be playing very differently to cope with the new style of mission you've been given. It's really fantastic. It really progresses the game well. I can see it being, you know, easy for people to pick up from that first mission because it introduces the rules gradually to you. But yeah, it pretty much, in terms of everything, the gameplay is fantastic, the production quality is fantastic, the universe it's set in is fantastic. Just love Mechs versus Minions. Number 2 is Project Elite. Now this is another cooperative game with real-time elements, although real-time is a lot more of a factor in Project Elite. In this game, we will be playing some kind of objective where we need to demolish certain buildings, or we need to retrieve a captive or something like that in these maps where we will be at an alien crash site or an abandoned lab. We are this elite team of agents trying to fight off all of these aliens that are represented by miniatures, tons of miniatures. And they are going to be spawning every round and basically making their way to your spawn zone. If they get there, the game's over. So you need to be running around as fast as you can, trying to achieve the objectives, trying to stop the aliens getting their way, and it's all done through the, you know, the escape style. Constantly roll as quick as you can, and the, you know, the bad side on the dice in this case is every time you roll a certain face, the aliens are going to move forward. So you desperately trying to get what you need is inevitably going to make the aliens advance ever forward. And it's just fantastic. The timed phases are only 2 minutes at a time. There are, I can't remember how many rounds there are in the game. There's about 7 or 8 rounds it can go up to if you haven't won by then. But it's all kind of tucked away in these tight little bursts of real time. It's not constantly pressuring you, constantly trying to roll. It's every 2 minutes you're all going to stop, take a breather, you know, talk about what the strategy is for the next round, see what else is coming out to block your way, see when the boss is going to come out, and the events that are going to change the rules and make it a bit harder for you. It's a really, really fantastic game. There are different missions inside it, which I didn't think changed it up that much. It feels like you were doing similar things with them, but just the base game where all of these different types of aliens are going to come out and combo together quite differently. You know, if certain things come out that would be really bad if they got really close to you, but they're not going to move very much. But then the runners come out that do move really quickly, and there's no space for them to spawn, so they're going to push all of those deadly guys forward. You know, things like that can happen, and it's a really, really fun game. It's a real shame as well, as I thought I've mentioned, that this is quite a storied game that's had, you know, a bit of trouble with kickstarting it and the fulfillment of that. And I would say that I was very lucky avoiding all of that, and I picked up a copy. I bought a copy at the UK Games Expo because I'd seen the run through, wasn't able to back it at the time, saw it there, just grabbed it. So I can understand people being frustrated with not having the games, but it's kind of got a bit of a sad ending as well, of like there's been so much kind of bad feeling about the way that it's ended up happening, that one of the designers, Konstantinos, has kind of said, well, that's it for Project Elite. I'll be happy to not hear about this game again because some of the things about it have been so bad. I think that's a massive shame, because there is an expansion available that I'd like to get at some point, but I could just see there being so much more for this game. There's so many more alien types you could add, characters, situations. You know, the expansion comes with another board. There's a two-sided board just in this box, which is going to change things up quite a bit, but the expansion's got another board in it and some more different ways of playing the game, some different types of enemies. It would be amazing if more came out for Project Elite, because I just love this game. We've played this a ton as well. It's fairly quick as well for what it is. Those timed phases, you know, even if you play through all 8, it's, you know, that's 16 minutes of timed, and then your time in between discussing it all, you know, that's your fault if you're taking a long time with that. It's a really, really fast-paced game, and just love the game. It's a fantastic cooperative game. It's a fantastic real-time game. It's, you know, kind of tower defensey, and all these aliens are endlessly advancing towards your base, and you need to work out which ones you need to stop first. It's just a really amazing experience, and I am really glad that I was able to play Project Elite number 2. And finally, that means number 1 of the year, A Feast for Odin from Uwe Rosenberg. I've got a playthrough for this available, for a solo playthrough for it. This is a game where we are basically trying to simulate the lifestyles of, you know, these Vikings. Everything that a Viking did, you know, you can probably do it in this game. There's, you know, raiding, pillaging, discovering new islands, there's farming, breeding animals. There's just a million things in this game. It's another one where you have a huge action board with, I think it's about 60 actions, maybe more than that you can take. And it's, you know, at its core, it's a worker placement game of, you're going to pick an action. Nobody can go there if you've been there previously. And an interesting twist on that is it's got these columns where you can do a basic version of the action, just spending one of your workers. But if you spend 2, you could do a slightly different, maybe slightly better version of that action. If you use 3, you can do an even better version, but now you can draw a card, and the occupation cards in it will give you certain powers, certain enhancements to actions. It might let you just take some tiles, take some points and things right away. It can give you a permanent action that you could use anytime for the rest of the game. And then if you put 4 Vikings in the final column, then you can play one of these cards down and then get that bonus. It's a really, really nice twist on placing these workers for not just the action you want to take, but the additional things you might get from occupation cards, from the column that you put them in. And then aside from all of this worker placement business, the core aim of the game is you've got these player boards with all of these -1 points on. So, you know, Agricola style, you're starting off with a ton of negative points that you need to work throughout the game. And it is on the back of the box, quite small here. We start off with a board like this, and all of the resources that you get throughout the game are, you know, they can be used to upgrade them and upgrade them and upgrade them, but you are going to need them to cover up these spaces on your personal player board. So it becomes a Tetris-y, patchworky puzzle of where to place these things most effectively to get the bonuses, to get the income, but most importantly, by the end of the game, cover up all of those negative points. It's quite a heavy game. It does lead to, especially when I'm playing on my own, it's not that the game is difficult, but it's trying to crack a puzzle of how can I get the most points out of this next action. There are times when, you know, my brain grinds to a halt from just, you know, trying to puzzle through all of these different outcomes. It's been quite quick as well, multiplayer. We got a 3-player game where we had to explain the whole thing as well. It was around 2 hours, which I was quite pleased with. Because this is a game where, because of that huge action board, you have to kind of explain every action before the game starts. It's not like just get the gist of it. You have to kind of go down and say, well, for this, you're going to need this and this and this, and in the future, it might lead on to these actions. You kind of have to set people up with enough information to be able to make some good decisions throughout the game. So even with a big explanation, it's never felt like it was dragging on. And actually, we got through it a lot quicker than I had anticipated. But yeah, just ridiculously thematic. It's it can be very different every time. Sometimes you have to push yourself for it to be different, but there are those occupation cards I mentioned that will give you not so much a guide throughout the game, but will give you little nudges in certain directions where if you can leverage those cards enough, you will get bonus points from them and get an easier time of it, get better actions as the game goes on. So that really is a Feast for Odin in a nutshell. It's number one just because of not just the fact that I love the gameplay itself and it's going to be different enough each time for me. The solo game as well is just, it's so good. It's a really nice system of you basically get workers in 2 player colors, and each round you're going to use a different color. So the actions you did in round 1 are blocked off for you in round 2 and aren't going to be available then until round 3 when those original workers come off. And that makes a really interesting play. It's a bit more difficult because you know that certain things you need are going to be blocked off every other round. It's easier in other ways in that you know that certain things aren't going to be taken by other players, like the islands. In the multiplayer game, there are islands you can discover, and over the course of the game, if they remain out in the display, they're going to get flipped to islands that have more powerful effects. Maybe they're worth more points. In the multiplayer game, you're always kind of worried I want to wait until it's the better island, but someone might just take it while it's the basic island. In the solo game, you haven't got that. You can guarantee these things are going to happen to you, but at the same time, you are blocking your own progress with the actions you took in the previous round. It came out at Essen, and I think I've played it about 10 times now. I think 3 multiplayer games and a ton of solo games. As I mentioned in my first impressions video, there is it's GAF Blizzard, I think is the username of the person that runs a weekly solo challenge on this on Board Game Geek. And while I haven't been able to keep up with it fully, it's been really fun seeing all these different scenarios that people are trying to crack and come up with the best score for. So yeah, very different each time. You can push yourselves in loads of different strategies. Huge box, tons of components, tons of different things that can happen in the game. And that is my number 1 for the year, Feast for Odin. And as I said, that is preliminary. There are a few games that I really hope will make the top 10. I'm not sure if they will, but really rooting for. I've heard people raving about Manhattan Project Energy Empire. I can't wait to get it played, and a few others that I mentioned at the start. But for now, I think that is how I'm feeling about the games of 2016. A fantastic year, so many games, so hard to whittle it down to just 10. I cheated a little bit with those 2 mentions of 2016-ish games, but we got there in the end. There are so many games I didn't mention that were fantastic, a lot that I've covered so far, a lot still to be covered on the channel because, there are just not enough hours in the day to get these things filmed. Especially around Christmas, you might have noticed that these playthroughs have kind of slowed down a little bit than normal. It's just been so hectic with work and everything, as you might imagine. But I hope for it to get back to normal in the new year. And so there will be a new playthrough quite shortly after Christmas, I would imagine. And that's both a promise and a threat. So I'll see you for the next gameplay videos. That was the best of 2016. Bye everyone. Thanks for watching.